I will be honest. A couple of months ago, when I received an email from Toronto-based fertility lawyer Sara Cohen suggesting that we connect and get to know each other a little bit more, professionally speaking, I was in awe. I mean, I've been to conferences, I've listened to Sara speak on the topic of fertility law on numerous occasions, and she wanted to connect with me? Well, she's brilliant, as you will hear in today's episode of the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. I learned so much, as I do every time she and I connect. Welcome to the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome, everyone. Today, I have the opportunity to introduce you to someone that I am slowly getting to know over the last couple of months. She reached out and offered that first connection, and now we know that we are going to be fast and lifelong friends. We just need to figure out all the different facets that that's going to happen in. Without any further ado, let me have you meet Sara Cohen. Welcome, Sara. I'm so glad that you're here. Please tell everyone who's listening how fabulous you are, the members of your family, the work that you do, all of the things.
Wow, what a hello. Thank you. I feel the same. I'm so excited about our connection. I feel like a lot of synergy.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to get to know you and hope we get to do lots of projects together. Interesting work that we both feel passionate about.
Mhm.
So my family, it's extremely heteronormative looking. We've got me and my husband and two boys who one is almost 16 and he's girl crazy, like really girl crazy.
Mhm.
And the other is 12 and he's all into sports. And I'm super close with both of them. And I
Love it.
feel grateful every day for being a parent. I'm extremely cheesy about it. They're like really are the lights of my life. And I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of people who want to have children. And when I was younger, before I got married, I had the conversation with my now husband and said, look, I'm going to be a parent and I don't care how we do it. And, if it's donor eggs, surrogacy, adoption, you name it, foster care, like I'm going to be a parent. Are you on board? And it took him a few days to think about it. And I actually appreciate it. You
Mhm.
don't want, like, this is so important to me. And I really feel a lot of the people I work with, it's the same thing. A huge percentage of my clients identify as gay or lesbian. Many cisgender, not everyone. But I would say when people are planning a family in the manner they're planning a family when they need a fertility lawyer, these are wanted children. These are people who absolutely want to be a parent. And I kind of see the decision making prior even to conception as being a parent because the intended parents are making these huge decisions that affect their future child. And it's actually really beautiful to watch.
Mhm.
So, to backtrack that a little bit, I'm a fertility lawyer, and my practice is very creatively named Fertility Law Canada. I have been doing this work for about 15 years. I've worked with about 3,500 people, maybe a little bit more by now. And I'm extremely passionate about the work that I do. Most of the people who see me are looking into any or all of egg donation, sperm donation, but usually known sperm donation. Most people don't see me if they're using a sperm bank, embryo donation, and I do known embryo donation, and surrogacy, usually gestational surrogacy, sometimes traditional surrogacy where the surrogate is actually genetically related to the baby they're carrying. I also work with polyamorous families, and sometimes just what I guess I would consider more creative family building. And it's something I am so passionate about. So I work with intended parents, but I also work with donors and surrogates. And I think that work is also super important. And for the lawyers who practice in this area, I think it's important always to make sure you're also doing work with the donors and the surrogates because their perspectives are actually like critical.
Mhm.
And I'm extremely grateful for what they do. And we want to protect them too. And whether it's their rights or make sure they understand the risks they're taking and what they're participating in. So most of my work is drafting contracts. I also deal with recognition of parentage of children born through surrogacy. And I love all that work so much. And part that I equally love is I'm just involved in trying to work on changing legislation and, participated with Ontario's changing legislation. I'm arguing or promoting some change on a regular basis to the federal government. I've assisted a little bit with Irish legislation. I've provided some background information to UK to allow single parents through surrogacy. I love to teach. Sometimes I lecture frequently. And just last night, I was participating in a panel at TMU University, and I continue to be completely fascinated
Mhm.
by the work we do, the issues we face. And I'm really lucky because which other lawyer have you ever spoken to who loves what they do as much as I love what I do?
I only find the ones who seem so passionate to be the ones, in my experience, who are working in a field such as your own. And I don't know many. I have met a few, but it is work that you do that, as you have said, is intentional. The people coming to you are absolutely intentional about why they're coming to you and the questions that they have and the information and support and guidance that they need from you, because what they want more than anything is to create the family that they've always dreamed of. And so how how can that not be just the best, most heartwarming work when you know you've always dreamed of being a parent, and I'm going to do what I can to help support you on that path. I mean, I do it from a different angle, but I fully get
No,
it.
you're there. I'm so grateful every day. And you're right, it's beautiful. For me, it's really beautiful when someone has a healthy baby. But my favorite part is not then. My favorite part is when you see the 10-year-olds and they've got, this entire life and their friends and their parents and their grandparents. And that's when you realize, or I realize, it's not just this one moment in time.
Mhm.
When you have a baby, that's actually point zero. That's not, you haven't reached the end. That's actually the beginning. Everything we're doing before that is like the negative leading up to zero. And then when you see these kids and their entire life later, that gives me shivers every time that,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I got to do the little tiny extra piece that was necessary to support this person coming into the world. Like it's so special.
The first child whose birth I attended in the role of support will be 27 in December.
No
And
way.
it's crazy for me to watch these adults now grow into these people who are starting to think about creating families of their own and things like that. So I fully get it. You're
So
right.
special.
You're there for that pre-family time. It's still family time, but it's that pre real family hands-on time, and then it just explodes and blossoms from there, which is just so cool.
Great. And I think we're lucky with the work that we do because it's not just getting pregnant,
Hmm.
which, a lot of the medical team, obviously, they're absolutely important, like duh, for the,
Hmm.
gestational surrogacy, for example, egg donation, for example, you do need a medical team behind you. But they're dealing usually with that moment of getting pregnant or the first 12 weeks and or just did we have a healthy pregnancy, which is and a baby born, healthy baby born. And that's like wonderful. But they don't really get to see that this baby is not just check mark a baby. This is now a person. And it's the person that just blows my mind.
Yeah. Can we talk for a minute about, because you've been doing this work for a long time, you have experience supporting people not just in the Greater Toronto area, but all over. As you said, you've even supported outside of Canada. What is the landscape like in Canada compared to other places in terms of the kind of work you do? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it cutting edge? Is it need a lot of other work to bring it to where you think it should be? What are your thoughts in that realm?
So just to clarify, the work that I do is actually, I have tons of international clients, especially gay men, who it is illegal to engage in surrogacy in almost every jurisdiction that where it would be safer to engage in surrogacy. For example, a place that has excellent medical care, good healthcare for the donors and surrogates as well, access to, insurance, and really strong legal systems. Um, Really, a lot of people choose to come to Canada because, in comparison to most places in the world, it's fabulous.
Mm.
If you ask me specifically about Canada, I would start criticizing all the places we need to change. And there are a lot of urgent places where we need to make change. But if I had to compare this to most jurisdictions in the world, I would say we are so blessed. So the way it works in Canada is right across the country. There's something called the Assisted Human Reproduction Act, which is probably, if you know nothing about fertility law in Canada, you probably know it's illegal to pay a donor. It's illegal to pay a surrogate. Both of them are punishable by up to 10 years in jail and or $500,000. I think that's bonkers, but it is what it is. No parents have ever been charged, although an agency was charged and pled guilty. In many places in the United States, you can pay a donor, you can pay a surrogate. In some Western European countries, for example, donation is perfectly permissible, but surrogacy is not. Then there's some places like the UK where surrogacy is permissible, but there's a whole bunch of traditional surrogacy where the traditional surrogate tries to keep a baby and is successful sometimes. So our framework is a lot safer, with the exception of Quebec, which is a big, huge mess. Don't do surrogacy in Quebec. But almost every province other than Quebec has really strong legislation about who is a parent. So the idea about don't pay a surrogate, don't pay an egg donor is right across the country. But the question of who is a parent is answered differently province by province.
Okay.
So, and probably the strongest and most progressive legislation is Ontario and British Columbia. Places like Alberta are less progressive. I'm not sure if anyone's surprised, but
No.
it is what it is. And then there's some places that don't really have exactly on point legislation, but seem to be a little bit more flexible because of that. So we've never had a gestational surrogate in Canada try to keep a baby, to the best of my knowledge. And that's a great thing. And at the same time, we don't have case law about what would happen.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're at. Donation is different. The provinces, or most provinces, changed their legislation in like the mid 2010s. So Ontario, for example, January 1st, 2017. And it's really clarified that a donor is not a parent. Like Section 5 of the Children's Law Reform Act literally says that.
Right.
At the same time, it's really cool because it allows what I call multi-parent families, one parent, two parents, three parents, four parents. It's intention based. So you just want to be very clear who's a donor and who's not a donor.
Hmm.
And every province also deals with that differently, but intended parent security of their family is so much stronger than it used to be. And I think that really is important for many reasons, but one of the reasons is that it really makes known donation much safer.
Right.
So it used to be, especially with a known sperm donor, it was really questionable. Is the donor a parent or a donor? And just the way the law kind of, it had always assumed that genetics make a male parent.
Right.
And now we have finally legislation that says, no, that's not the case. It's intention based. So even with a known donor, it used to be fraudulent to not put the known donor. More, it used to be fraudulent to put the non-caring mom in a two-mom family on a birth certificate where a known donor was used without getting like a declaration of parentage.
Okay.
So thank goodness that's not the case anymore.
Right.
But that's also a provincial issue of who is a parent through donation. Quebec is an outlier. It actually now requires a donor registry, which I think is super cool. And I hope the other provinces follow suit. And I'm really curious what that ends up looking like and
Right.
how that affects both from the perspective of the donor conceived person and from the perspective of being able to access gametes. It's kind of where we're at. And in comparison to most other places, it's fabulous. And we have lots of work to do here.
Do you feel as though with the governments that you have worked alongside to help the changes that you've seen be made over the last even decade, do you feel like continues to be an appetite to improve the situation, or do you feel like it depends on the government? Do you feel like it depends on like what factors affect the appetite for making the changes that would make the whole process even better than it is?
So the Ontario government has actually done a lot of work. Part of it because they had no choice, because in 2016 they were sued for basically discriminating against two-mom families, and there were charter issues involved. And as a result of that, they had 1 month, Ontario, to change its legislation. And that's where we got what we just spoke about, that a donor is not a parent. The other mom who's not caring can right away go on the birth certificate. She is a parent. And Ontario is not perfect legislation, but it looks really good. I don't like that it was the Liberal government, the Ontario Liberal government, had to be sued to make these changes, but that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
There is an appetite right now for the provinces to fund fertility treatments. And
Right.
I was speaking about it with a political scientist last night who's very talented. And she was like, this is just something people do as an election promise. And she's probably right.
Sure.
But we're getting somewhere. I think every single province right now has some sort of funding, and all different province by province. Some of it is just tax credits, which I'm uncomfortable with because that's not as helpful for people who are financially struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And this is third party reproduction is extremely expensive, no matter how you do it. Um, Ontario, as I'm sure you know, it's like one funded cycle up to a certain age. Lots, you can do as much IUI, but IVF, you can only get one funded cycle. But every province is different. But there is seemingly an appetite then to discuss fertility. I mean, when I started this area, it was like, shh, quiet, quiet. People were embarrassed. It was very, very private. Now we have, walks and campaigns and political appetite to fund. When it comes to changing the federal legislation, which is now what I would love to see changed, it's government by government. I really thought when we had Justin Trudeau originally, with his emphasis on women in particular, my expectation was that we would get somewhere, and we didn't. And Anthony Housefather, the MP from Montreal, brought a private member's bill, and then his number just didn't get called. And he did a great job. It was legislation that would have amended the Assisted Human Reproduction Act simply to decriminalize compensated surrogacy and compensated gamete donation. And there have been huge problems because of this criminalization of compensation, which we can talk about if you'd like.
Mm-hmm.
And it just never was called his number. And then Senator Monsian kind of took up the charge on that. And, I think came at it from a bit of a different perspective, came at it a little bit more from a feminist perspective about, yeah, a woman can make a decision about what to do with her body. And please don't be paternalistic. Let her decide. And
Right.
and I think she was doing a great job too. And then COVID hit. And, everyone's focus had to shift, of course. I am past president of Fertility Matters Canada. And Fertility Matters Canada has made huge strides in participating in the conversation. And we have spoken a lot with really across the political parties, right across. And it seems very frequently we do get an appetite
Hmm.
for, yes, I didn't even realize that it's criminal to compensate a sperm donor, compensate an egg donor, compensate a surrogate. I had no idea. Yeah, let's change that. It seems obvious, but I haven't seen it happen. I'm hopeful again that this government, you know, please,
Hmm.
take an interest in this issue. I think for some people, there's some people who take a feminist perspective and think we are commodifying a woman's body in particular.
Right.
So they don't want to change this legislation. So there's lots of different perspectives on it. So maybe it's a little bit controversial. So people don't
Sure.
want to go down there. And then, you know what? When it seemed as if the conservative government was going to win, Melissa Lantsman was, it was very clear to her, of course, we need to change this legislation. So I really do think it depends on who's in power, the perspective they take in terms of are they coming at it from like a libertarian perspective
Yeah.
or like a women's right perspective. Like every government is different, but I do think it's going to be somewhat controversial. So we can't get, we haven't made change and we have worked so hard at making
Hmm.
change. So, we have a new government again, time to make another go at it.
I think that makes sense. Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm Rowan J. Knox, author, speaker, and human rights advocate. I'm also a dad, and my kids are growing up. And now that they are growing up, my partner Danny and I are trying something new. We are opening a trans-owned and operated coffee shop in the heart of Toronto's LGBTQ village. It's going to be called Understory, and we really hope you'll check it out when it opens this winter. If you want to know more, you can visit us at understorycafe.com. See you soon, Toronto.
It's interesting to me, and I want to talk a little bit about compensation because I think in my head, and I'm far removed from being in the planning a family phase of life. So, but in my head, one of the things that I love about Canada's not compensating is the impression that I have that the people who are making the donations are doing it because they have a reason to want to do that. So they want to come in with their complete medical history up to date so that they know entirely what they can tell. They're doing it because someone that they love has probably been in a similar situation or what have you. And then I worry that, there's that stereotype. It's kind of like the paying somebody for blood donation. The stereotype is that I need an extra $50 for the weekend, so I'm going to go and make this donation. And I'm really going into it not thinking about the fact that a human life may come out of the steps that I've taken. And I'm just thinking about how it's impacting me and benefiting me in this particular moment. So I may not know my entire family history. I may not know what my genealogy looks like. I may not, there's so many questions I may not have answers to, whether it's eggs or sperm or whatever we're talking about when we're looking at compensation. Are those valid concerns or thoughts with that whole process?
Of course, your concerns are valid, and some of them some of them really resonate with me. Not everything. So I'm imagining, first of all, in terms of the information that we get from donors now, the safety of sperm and ova regulations really requires actually quite a bit of information, whether it's through genetic testing or going 3 generations back in genetic information that comes from your family's medical history.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more information that's legally required right now. But I think to your point, yeah, it is possible that someone's just going to be doing it for the money. It is
Right.
possible. I think if we require known donation, which is what I really, really want, I think people are probably going to have to be more thoughtful about it because there are going to be probably people who are donor conceived who are going to know who you are and know about you and probably require quite a bit more thought. We can require counseling, etc. But part of the reason it is so important to me that we actually decriminalize compensation for donors is that we have so little sperm being donated in Canada,
Right.
like incredibly small amount. So before, when it was not criminalized to compensate donors, we had something like 20 sperm banks across the country. As of recently, we had one which had about 20 donors a year, and now that one just closed. Okay. So now we have no national sperm banks in the country. When we had one with 20 donors, we were using the same sperm again and again and again. These kids obviously are going to be related to each other, a whole bunch of them without knowing.
Right.
And they don't have a right to information about who the donor is, updated medical information. They just didn't have that. And now, and even then, I think we were importing like 95% of our donor sperm, for example. And we don't have access to information. And these donors are being paid, the ones we're importing from, anyways. So we're buying sperm from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Those donors are paid anyways.
Right.
So if it's just about don't pay in Canada, even though these donors are paid anyways in the United States, like that's kind of silly. You're
Mm-hmm.
still having the compensation, just not in Canada. Does it really matter?
Right.
So, and you're losing the benefit of having Canadian donors who have maybe more our cultural values, who are really quite on board for known donation, much more in my experience than many American donors. And then, if we're importing all of our gametes or almost all of our gametes, we don't know how many times the same gametes are being used across our country. And we don't have a right to any more information than is being sought by the sperm bank in the United States. We're completely reliant on policy that has nothing to do with our policy. And the only thing we really have laws about is the testing of the medical testing of what's happening to the donors. We lose the right and ability to have our own policies about the information available to donor conceived people when we're relying on mostly anonymously donated gametes, sometimes open ID gametes that are paid for anyways in the United States. So I think it's silly because whether the donor's paid in the United States or paid in Canada,
they're paid.
If they are being attracted to $50, $100, $150, they're also being attracted there. I'd rather them be attracted here, but at least have donor registries, have some laws about how many times we can use the same gametes again and again in a population, give the donor conceived people access to information about who they're related to, new updated medical information. I just think we could do such a better job if we were able to have more Canadian donors. And I don't think we're going to be able to unless we decriminalize compensation. And it's not as easy to donate sperm as people think it is in terms of I think people think like, oh, no big deal, like one and done, you're at the clinic for, I don't know, an hour and you're done. It's not just look like that. You usually go in 3 times in 1 week. You do quite a bit of testing. And as we were talking about before, you either have to do genetic testing or know history from 3 generations back. And I think if you required known donation and required maybe counseling and the psychological assessment, I think we could address some of the concerns you have, which are completely valid.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you on some of those concerns. It's just that they're being paid anyways.
Yeah. And you're right. I don't think a lot of us think about that, although we understand. I mean, many of the people that I've interviewed from within Canada who have used donor sperm speak about the fact that they had to go to the US to be able to have access to it. But they don't think about the fact that those people have been paid.
Yeah.
They know they paid for it, but yeah.
Yeah. So whether the Canadian sperm bank pays them or the American sperm bank pays them, they're getting paid anyways.
Yeah.
So it's NIMBY legislation, which is offensive to me, not in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And now we import a lot of donor eggs too. And that is more concerning to me even because there's medical risk to a donor. And we don't know whether or not she has appropriate insurance. I don't know if she had ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And I worry about her as well as the same issues as we worry about the donor conceived person who is conceived using donor egg or donor sperm. I also worry about the donor. I don't know what's happening, what kind of medical care she's getting.
Right. And if she's doing it and being paid, but it hasn't been someone specifically reaching out to her saying, I like your profile. I would like to hire you to donate your eggs, then you're right. It's really just all potentially getting lost in the system.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's so much better if it's a known donation. And I mean, I personally, I'm really cheesy. I really prefer relationships between the parties. I think it's healthier for everyone and it's really valuable for all the parties, including the donor, if that's what they want. And obviously the donor conceived person.
Right.
So I think that's very, very valuable. And where I really, the egg banks worried in terms of we're just importing it and being paid there. Wouldn't it be nicer to allow donors to be paid here, but have the Canadian mentality switch on it and allow our registries really track number of cycles, track number of incidents of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, and then again, like limit the number of times we can donate how, and then follow these kids to make sure they know who they're related to
Yeah.
and updated medical information and as well as identifying information about the donor.
And I've spoken to donor conceived people about this in the past. I don't think we give enough thought, and we, being a universal, we sort of, even as parents or potential parents of these donor conceived children, we don't spend enough time thinking about the questions that those children may grow into in their lives that they are going to want to know the answers to, or they may not want to know the answers to. But if we don't think about that pathway and about what some of those questions might be and some of those answers may need to be, then we take away their right or their opportunity to learn a complete picture of themselves.
Exactly. And you're right. A lot of the donor conceived people like do not want that information. It's not relevant to them. But at least the parents are a repository of that information should that donor conceived person want it.
Yeah.
And there is no right in Canadian law to have access to that information. Actually, Quebec is the only place now that has a registry, and this is brand new. So I don't really yet know what that is going to look like and how
Right.
that's going to affect attracting donors, etc. But the donor conceived people do not have the right to information. So because of that, and because of other reasons that we've kind of touched on, I do think intended parents need to think about the person at the end of this, not just the pregnancy, and kind of put their future child in the best position in case that's what they want.
That's very true. What I especially like is the Canadian spin that you are able to attach to this entire conversation, because I have spoken with other lawyers in the past, and we speak so much about the US and how things are in the US, and their system is entirely different than ours is. And what I really like is that you can offer that perspective that they simply can't. One thing that absolutely I still struggle to understand is how two people in the US can be put on a birth certificate, but that doesn't absolutely make them parents in the eyes of the law. In Canada, do you see that ever changing? Because when I tell somebody that two people's names on a birth certificate in Canada, that's parentage. If that's how it's been registered, unless it's contested, that's parentage for the child moving forward. We don't need a second or step parent adoption or something like that to cohesively solidify who the members of the parenting family are. Do you see that changing or potentially changing in Canada?
Well, we've been going, the direction has been better and better to strengthen the safety of intended parents being the only parents of the child. So it used to be up until January 1st, 2017, it wasn't clear who was a parent to some extent. It was fraudulent to put on a female name who didn't carry the baby when there was no sperm donation. And the law has gotten better and better in protecting and really defining who a parent is and who a parent is not. So I think what you're referring to are places like Ontario, British Columbia, where it's just super clear in particular. It's actually pretty clear in Alberta. Like there's lots of places where it's pretty clear. When a baby's born through surrogacy, it's a bit different
Mhm.
because every single place in Canada, even though we must have this agreement prior to the embryo transfer, assuming this is gestational surrogacy or a traditional surrogacy prior to the insemination, the surrogate is still a parent at the moment the baby's born. So that is more complicated than donor conception.
Mhm.
You should know, or people should know, that in places like Ontario and British Columbia, if a baby's born through surrogacy, it's okay. If the parents have no genetic relationship to the child, that's not the case in Alberta. So every province is different. And I don't think people know that
Mhm.
always, that
Mhm.
it looks different province by province. But Ontario and British Columbia, if you have a baby born through surrogacy and you've done the contract properly and the surrogate got independent legal advice, even if you use donor sperm, donor egg, and a surrogate, it's like actually quite easy to register the intended parents as the parents so long as the surrogate doesn't try to keep a baby, which, as I was saying, I don't think we've ever had a gestational surrogate try to keep a baby. And that's great. It makes it a lot cheaper for the intended parents.
Mhm.
And I like that what we're saying is the intention is what makes a parent. You still have to go through that process, though, where the surrogate must give consent. In the other provinces, you still have to go to court in
Okay.
order to get a birth certificate that has the
Oh,
intended parents and not the surrogate.
right.
So, and that's what it used to look like in Ontario and British Columbia too, but it doesn't look like that anymore. I will tell you, for non heteronormative family building, for international non-heteronormative family building, I still recommend they also get a court order if the baby's born in Ontario or British Columbia, because LGBTQ rights aren't strong in every country. There are places where you might have problems, and a birth certificate is presumption of parentage. The court order is stronger.
Right.
So spend the extra few $1,000s and get that court order. If you're a non-heteronormative international family, I recommend it. But really, for anyone else, I think just the birth certificate's good enough
Mhm.
because it's recognizing intention-based parentage, which is kind of what's going on in our provinces.
That's good to know. That is good to know because I do get asked those kinds of questions all the time. And so it's helpful to have it sort of laid out a little bit more. And again, it's part of the questions that I get come from people who get a lot of their information from people, families, organizations south of the border and or outside
And
of
it's
Canada in
different.
general. And it looks different everywhere else.
You know what makes me crazy? There are some states where really donor conception is really legitimately safe. And there are some states where it's not so safe for a mom who doesn't carry.
Mhm.
And it makes me crazy when moms who relied on the concept that a donor is not a parent and both moms are the parent, if they divorce or separate and the mom who carried them takes a position against the other mom that they're not really a parent, oh my God, it breaks my heart. Absolutely
100%.
breaks my heart. So I haven't seen that at least since our legislation changed in Ontario, for example, but that does come out of the United States. And those cases break my heart and they make me so mad because they set back
Mm.
the rights of non heteronormative parenting
Yeah,
and all the work that's been done to solidify the safety of those families.
exactly. Oh, it's so true. I feel like we could talk about this topic for hours and hours, and quite frankly, off camera, we probably will. However, I'm recognizing the time, and I want to let you get back to your day. I do want to let listeners know that Sara and I are talking about collaborating in other areas. We've got lots of ideas and brainstorms going on, so do keep an eye on our social media because you will be able to learn more about that. You can, as you know, you can always follow babyREADY at babyREADY LGBTQ. You can follow Sara on Instagram at fertility law. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today and sharing your wisdom with those who are in the planning phases and they just need to know what they need to know.
My pleasure, and I can talk about this forever. So if you need anything or someone else like has questions, I'm super chatty and love talking about third party reproduction and fertility law. So anytime, just send me a note.
I absolutely will. And Sarah's contact information will be in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. As a queer individual with colonial lineage, I want to first acknowledge the land upon which I live and work. Being from what is now known as Burlington, Ontario, I recognize the original ancestry of these lands as they span from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment and beyond. These lands are steeped in Indigenous history that benefits my community every day. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I stand is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land dictates everything about our ways of being. Particularly, the land teaches us about fluidity. Concepts of the binary system and heteropatriarchy were imposed by the colonials who were, at the same time, removing children from their homes, families, and all that was familiar to them. These same children were divided by the only two prescribed binaries recognized by the settlers, and they were forced to conform to a performative, gendered falsehood. The land doesn't operate under binary thinking. It is diverse, complex, and unpredictable at times. Rather, the land holds us and all of our remarkable pasts and identities. Every organism and spirit has a purpose. It is from this understanding that I strive to live and grow. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.